Hi, Mark DeJesus here. I want to take a moment to share with you 6 stages of spiritual heart disease. I outline these in my book, God Loves Me and I Love Myself. I want to mention them, but quickly give one word of reference to what you need to do if you find yourself in one of these 6 stages. It begins up here at the top and it sequentially works its way down to the very last stage. The last stage, the numb or checked out stage, can be very, very dangerous because at that stage, we have numbed out and we have checked out to the things going on in our life. You see, the heart has this big breaker to it. And it's the breaker of feeling, connecting to, acknowledging, recognizing. When we want to avoid pain, we often pull that breaker, thinking, I'm going to pull this breaker to avoid this sadness, this pain, this grief, this sorrow. What we don't realize is we pulled the main breaker. So maybe we don't feel the pain or the sadness or sorrow anymore, but we also can't feel joy. We also can't feel happiness. We also can't feel excitement. And so this is a problem that many people find themselves in, is they're going to psychiatrists or psychologists or counselors, or they're going, I need medication or I need this, and that may be true, but many people have just not worked through the pain in their heart, and they've not processed through where they're at in one of these stages in their life and in their journey that they can't feel and they can't connect anymore. So we want to be able to recognize which stage are we at and what do we need to do. The first stage is the broken heart, which everybody has. Even if you are pretty well adapted and emotionally healthy, there's still areas of your heart that are broken. There are still areas that need healing, that need restoration, that need God's work to take place in those areas. So none of us are just like perfectly well. We all have broken areas. Some of us can feel like we're more of a hot mess than we were before or than someone else. It doesn't matter. Each one of us is in our own journey and stage. So the key for the broken heart is recognition. The more that you're in denial of areas in your life, the more you'll defend them, the more you'll protect them, the more that you'll keep up walls for whatever reason. You don't want to look bad. You don't want people to think you're less than. And all that stuff really needs to end, because we need to start cultivating a culture where we honestly are aware and can discern areas in our life we're allowing God permission and access to, because He's not going to force Himself into areas of our life. We have to recognize and we have to allow Him to come in and begin to heal some of those places. But because of our brokenness, we often move into a second stage, which fear now has more access. The more brokenness we have, the more fearful we are, the more anxious, the more worried, the more concern we have that keeps going, the more we ruminate, the more we obsess, the more we don't feel safe, the more we feel pressure in life. We feel driven. We are more susceptible to panic attacks. We're more susceptible to being overstressed. Why? Because the broken areas are now being invaded by fear. But the solution to a fearful heart is love. Getting a revelation of the Father's love for you. 1 John 4:18 talks about perfect love casts out fear. You see the language there? The very presence of love actually casts out the presence of fear's operation in your life. So when you are afraid, it's not just a boldness and courageousness issue or an intelligence issue. It's a love deficit. Love needs to have a greater work. That's why the verse continues to say that he who fears has not been made perfect in love. So anywhere where fear resides is just a place that love has not had its work yet. That's why you need to recognize your broken heart and begin to have an experience of love. Or maybe you recognize this third stage is anger. Anger usually comes out of those places that are stressed, are fearful, are taxed, are overburdened, overwhelmed, anxious, coming out of our brokenness. See how they're connected to each other. And so that anger can go in 2 directions. It gets out and you just lash out at people, unleash it on those around you. Or like most people, it gets pent up. And if that anger gets pent up, it comes out in funny ways, or you suppress it, and then it comes up later and you don't know why you're acting the way that you're acting. People around you feel the anger, they feel the hostility, but you need to come to recognition of it in your own life. So what do you do about that if you recognize, okay, I got some anger? You need to start being more honest about hurt in your life, about hurt and issues that have caused you pain, that have rubbed up against you, and begin getting honest with God in your interaction. Stop suppressing it. Stop taking it out on other people. Bring it to God and start processing and exchange with Him. Because then when you get honest with Him, He can deal with maybe why you're angry. What's the wound that's there that constantly gets you responding in anger? Because when you're usually angry in a situation, it has little to do with that situation. It's usually an unhealed area of your past that's now springing up in the present, because this exchange looks a little bit like the pain of the past. So it's rising up. And our anger can often protect those broken places. Well, as God begins to heal the broken areas, help you deal with your fears, anger can begin to heal. And there's other ways to deal with it. Again, I'm using just kind of one-word references to lead you into the journey of healing process. Then what happens is we're broken, we're fearful, we're angry, we get worn out. And that weariness develops a hopelessness, where now when we see our future, the vision for our life is more based on dread, based on negativity, based on I can't catch a break, I don't know that I can break through, all these problems I constantly have. It creates open doors for depression, creates open doors for deep sadness, negativity that's happening. Okay, if you find yourself in that place, what do you need to do? You need to examine your story. What's the story that I believe in my life? What's the story? Because everybody has a story. Everybody has a narrative that they follow throughout. Here's where I have been. Here's where I am. Here's where I'm going. If that gets tainted by the enemy's lies, then it's going to hinder your journey looking forward, because hope is all about your vision. Hope is all about how you see moving forward. It's all about how you take your past, put it in perspective to your present, and how you're moving forward. So we have to examine the story. Is this story really serving my health? Is it really a story that I need to believe? Because two people can go through the same thing and come out of it with two totally different stories. It's all about perspective. So, what's the narrative that I'm coming into agreement over my life? Is the story I'm living by an empowering story, or is it a disempowering story? Because if it's disempowering, then what it will do is it'll keep you in a place of hopelessness. Your vision will lack, and therefore your faith will struggle. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. So we have to look at what's the story that we're listening to, what is the story that we are living by, and give God permission, catch this, to reinterpret the story of our lives. You may have been through this, and this, and believed such and such a story. Is that the report of the Lord? Is that what God says about your story? That this happened to you negative, this bad thing, so therefore you're stuck and then you'll never catch a break? Or is He saying this may be what you've been through, but I am a God who can heal, deliver you, and set your feet on a rock and give you a new song, give you a new story. He's a God who's redemptive. That's who He is in His nature. So we want to examine the story. The fifth stage, though, if we don't deal with this, we start to become hard. And we become hard in our hearts mainly because we're protecting. You see, that hard heart has stuff behind it, woundedness, brokenness, that's never been dealt with. So we get this stubbornness now. And so when people try to access those areas, we wall off. We're hard towards them. We're hard towards God. And it becomes very difficult because we lose our sense of believing. And if you find yourself in that place, really the only solution is humility. We often have to hit our head against the wall, humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God. We usually have to humble ourselves before some family members, our spouse, or our children, or authority figures in our life. We have to humble ourselves and recognize I'm broken and start the process and letting God heal. If not, what happens is we become numb and disconnected now to even being able to be touched. And many of us live in this stage. Now, you say, well, what do I do? Am I hopeless if I'm at this stage? Well, I will say this. When somebody gets in this state for a very long time, it's very hard to emotionally engage them. It's like lights are on, nobody's home. And so when they're in this stage, it can be very difficult. You've got to, put the paddles on and go, clear, goose, wake up. How do we do that? The only way I've found to help this area is we've got to address pain. We've got to awaken to the fact of there's been pain in our life, things that have happened to us, things that should have happened that didn't happen in our life, disappointments that we need to address full front and center without going into pity, without going into woe is me, my life is over, but just grieving it, giving it before God and just grieving it before Him. And sometimes the pain leads to tears, and that's okay because we want to engage the emotional life of the heart again so that we live awakened and alive. So find where you are in this process and begin using these words as a springboard into helping your healing process. I pray this helps you. Send me your questions. Send me more topics that I can be a help to in your life. I want to see you live healed, free, and transformed. God bless you.